The story of Native American communities is one marked by incredible strength and survival, yet also one of deep and enduring pain. Among the darkest chapters in their history is the intentional introduction of harmful substances like alcohol and opium, which were used to break down the fabric of Native societies. This episode of Native Journal uncovers how drugs became tools of control, intentionally weakening communities from within. The arrival of Europeans in the 16th and 17th centuries brought many new goods to the Americas, including alcohol, which quickly evolved from a simple trade item into a weapon of colonization. Alcohol disrupted social structures, leading to increased violence, loss of social roles, and eroded governance. Dependency took hold, and traders capitalized on this, fueling a cycle of debt and economic exploitation that saw Native Americans losing their independence and resources. Later, opium followed as another tool of control, further destabilizing communities. Then came the era of boarding schools, where Native children were separated from their families and forced into institutions aiming to strip away their cultural identities. There, substances were used to further control and manipulate them. This calculated use of harmful substances served a larger agenda, to erase Native cultures, making domination easier. Today, the scars of these actions remain, with Native communities still grappling with high rates of substance abuse, mental health issues, and cultural erosion. Despite these tragedies, the resilience of Native Americans continues to shine through, offering a powerful reminder of the injustices they've endured. The complex history of substance introduction into Native American communities reveals a deliberate strategy to undermine and exploit indigenous societies. Alcohol, initially traded for resources, quickly became a tool of colonization, used to destabilize and control. Its pervasive effects shattered social structures, fostering addiction, violence, and the erosion of traditional values. This destruction was compounded by the introduction of opium in the 19th century, further weakening communities through dependence. Government policies during the boarding school era intensified this assault, with Native children forcibly assimilated into Euro-American norms and exposed to substances as tools of control. These injustices, marked by loss of culture, ongoing addiction issues, and systemic barriers to recovery, highlight the need for reconciliation efforts that address the root causes, including racism and economic disenfranchisement. Understanding this history is essential for meaningful change, as efforts to reclaim heritage and rebuild communities continue amid challenges. Addressing the enduring legacies of substance abuse and cultural erosion in Native American communities is a complex and multifaceted challenge. Efforts to heal and rebuild are often hindered by systemic barriers, including limited access to quality healthcare, economic opportunities, and culturally appropriate support services. The lack of adequate mental health resources exacerbates the challenges faced by individuals struggling with addiction and trauma. Economic disenfranchisement remains a significant obstacle, as many Native American communities grapple with high unemployment rates and limited access to education and vocational training. This economic instability further perpetuates cycles of poverty and addiction, making it difficult for communities to achieve self-sufficiency and resilience. Culturally appropriate support services are crucial for effective healing, yet they are often scarce or inaccessible. Traditional healing practices and community-based interventions are essential for addressing the unique needs of Native American populations, but these services are frequently underfunded and overlooked by mainstream healthcare systems. Understanding the historical context of substance abuse and cultural suppression is crucial for promoting meaningful reconciliation and advocacy efforts. By acknowledging the atrocities committed against indigenous populations and their ongoing repercussions, society can take steps toward rectifying past wrongs and supporting the healing and empowerment of Native American communities. Promoting awareness involves educating the broader public about the historical and ongoing challenges faced by Native Americans. This includes highlighting the role of substances like alcohol and methamphetamine in the systematic dismantling of indigenous societies and the long-term impacts of these actions. Advocacy efforts must focus on dismantling systemic barriers, increasing access to quality healthcare, expanding economic opportunities, and supporting culturally appropriate services. Empowering Native American communities requires a multifaceted approach that addresses both immediate needs and long-term structural issues. This includes providing comprehensive mental health services, supporting economic development initiatives, and fostering environments where cultural practices can thrive. Legal and policy reforms are necessary to ensure that Native American voices are heard and respected in decision-making processes that affect their communities. Justice for Native American communities also involves holding accountable those responsible for historical injustices and ensuring that reparations and support are provided to address the harms inflicted. This includes acknowledging the role of governmental policies and colonial practices in perpetuating substance abuse and cultural erosion, and taking concrete steps to rectify these injustices. Recognizing and addressing the historical and ongoing challenges faced by Native American communities is essential for fostering a more equitable and inclusive future. This involves not only supporting Native American communities in their efforts to heal and rebuild but also working towards systemic changes that prevent the recurrence of such injustices. Educational initiatives, cultural preservation programs, and community-based support systems play a vital role in this process. By valuing and integrating Native American perspectives and knowledge into broader societal frameworks, we can create a more inclusive environment that respects and celebrates the diversity and resilience of indigenous cultures. The deliberate use of substances like alcohol and methamphetamine as tools of colonization represents one of the darkest chapters in human history. These actions were part of a broader strategy to undermine and dismantle Native American societies, leading to enduring legacies of addiction, mental health challenges, socioeconomic disparities, and cultural erosion. Understanding this historical context is crucial for acknowledging the atrocities committed against indigenous populations and their ongoing repercussions. As we move forward, it is imperative to engage in meaningful reconciliation efforts, promote awareness, and advocate for justice and empowerment for Native American communities. By recognizing and addressing the historical and systemic barriers that continue to hinder their progress, we can work towards fostering a more equitable and inclusive future for all. The strategic use of substances like alcohol and opium by European colonists was a deliberate effort to weaken Native American societies. Alcohol, especially, became a devastating force, impacting Native American women the hardest as they endured alcohol-fueled violence and exploitation. Women, who were central to many Native societies, suffered immensely, and the trauma of family breakdown left lasting scars. Alcohol abuse has perpetuated cycles of dependency, ill health, and social dysfunction, most tragically affecting unborn children through high rates of fetal alcohol syndrome, FAS. European traders exploited this vulnerability, embedding alcohol into the fabric of Native communities to erode cultural identities and foster reliance on European goods. Alcohol also became a tool to facilitate land seizures, with debt forcing Native Americans to relinquish their lands, further stripping them of autonomy and culture. This destructive legacy continues to haunt Native communities, who still face high rates of alcohol-related issues. Recognizing and addressing this historical trauma is crucial for healing, and support for culturally sensitive, community-led initiatives is essential to reclaim cultural identities and resilience. Opium, introduced in the 19th century, added another layer of harm. Initially brought by European traders for medicinal use, opium soon became a weapon of control, weakening Native societies through addiction. This led to exploitation and the breakdown of traditional social structures, making it easier for colonists to dominate Native American communities. By fueling dependency, opium stripped communities of their capacity to resist, leaving individuals vulnerable and further entrenching colonial power. The dual assault of alcohol and opium exemplifies the calculated strategies used to dismantle Native societies, underscoring the need for awareness, reconciliation, and a dedicated effort to support healing and empowerment for Native American communities. The use of opium among Native Americans was not merely an issue of personal addiction. It became a tool of widespread cultural and social destruction, a method by which colonial powers sought to dismantle the fabric of Native American life. The deliberate spread of opium addiction undermined resistance, disrupted governance, and left native communities at the mercy of colonists who sought to control their land, labor, and resources. The British fur traders, in particular, recognized the potential of opium as a tool for controlling Native American populations. By fostering addiction, they were able to exploit the vulnerability of native communities, extracting valuable resources in exchange for the drug. This exploitation was not limited to economic gain. It also served a more insidious purpose, breaking the will and spirit of Native American societies. As opium addiction took hold, it further disrupted traditional practices, weakening the cultural and social bonds that had sustained native communities for centuries. The introduction of opium was part of a broader strategy of colonization that sought to weaken and subjugate Native American populations. By fostering dependency on addictive substances like opium, European settlers and traders created a cycle of addiction that left native communities vulnerable to further exploitation. The weakening of tribal governance and traditional practices made it easier for colonizers to exert control, seizing land and resources with little resistance. Opium addiction did more than weaken individuals. It tore apart the social fabric of entire communities. Traditional governance structures were undermined as leaders struggled to maintain order and cohesion in the face of widespread addiction. The ability of Native American communities to resist colonial domination was severely compromised, as addiction left individuals and tribes dependent on the very forces that sought to destroy them. The deliberate spread of opium was not merely an act of economic exploitation. It was a calculated effort to dismantle the cultural and social structures that had sustained Native American societies for generations. By fostering addiction, colonizers were able to weaken resistance, erode cultural practices, and facilitate the seizure of land and resources. The effects of opium addiction were devastating, leaving a legacy of social disintegration, poverty, and cultural erosion that continues to affect Native American communities to this day. Addressing the lasting effects of substance abuse in Native American communities requires a comprehensive and culturally sensitive approach. Efforts to heal from the trauma of alcohol and opium addiction must be rooted in the understanding of these substances as tools of colonial oppression. By acknowledging the deliberate use of these substances to weaken and control Native American populations, we can begin to dismantle the systems and structures that continue to perpetuate these harms. Supporting Native American communities in reclaiming their cultural identities and healing from addiction trauma is crucial for fostering resilience and empowerment. Culturally sensitive support services, community-driven initiatives, and policies aimed at removing systemic barriers to health, education, and economic opportunities are essential for breaking cycles of addiction and dysfunction. Healing from colonial legacies demands a commitment to acknowledging the historical trauma inflicted on Native Americans and collaborating to build a future where they can flourish. By addressing the root causes of substance abuse, dismantling systems that perpetuate inequality, and assisting Native communities in their journey toward healing, we can begin to mend the wounds of centuries-long exploitation and oppression. The tragic history of alcohol and opium as colonial weapons serves as a stark reminder of the destructive power of unchecked exploitation. Only through acknowledging this past and working to mitigate its ongoing effects can we foster a more just and equitable future for Native American communities. Alcohol and opium were deliberate tools used by colonizers to undermine native resistance and enforce assimilation. These substances bred dependency and despair, reducing native resistance to European encroachment. The physical and societal toll of addiction was profound, tearing apart families, disrupting traditional economies, and spreading diseases, which widened the disparities between Native Americans and Europeans. Addressing this history is key to understanding and reversing its lasting impacts. Despite the widespread devastation caused by opium addiction, Native American communities demonstrated remarkable resilience in their struggle against this destructive force. Traditional healers and community leaders recognized the harm that opium was inflicting on their people and sought to combat its effects through spiritual ceremonies, herbal remedies, and communal support systems. These efforts were met with resistance from powerful individuals and organizations, including the Hudson's Bay Company, which profited from the supply of opium to Native American communities and actively discouraged any attempts to curb its use. The struggle to eliminate opium addiction was a difficult one, but by the late 19th century, the use of the drug among Native Americans had gradually declined. However, the scars of addiction and the lasting social and cultural damage continued to haunt Native communities. The history of opium addiction among Native Americans serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of colonialism and the enduring struggle for Native American sovereignty. Today, the issue of substance abuse within Native American communities remains a pressing concern. The legacy of opium addiction, coupled with ongoing challenges such as poverty, intergenerational trauma, and limited access to healthcare, has contributed to high rates of addiction to alcohol, prescription drugs, and other substances. Addressing these issues requires a holistic approach that considers the historical, cultural, and social factors that contribute to addiction in Native American communities. One critical aspect of addressing substance abuse is the development of culturally sensitive treatment programs that respect and incorporate Indigenous traditions. These programs must be paired with community-based prevention efforts and initiatives that address the underlying socioeconomic challenges, such as poverty, unemployment, and limited access to healthcare, that often lead to substance use. By supporting Native communities in reclaiming their cultural identity, promoting resilience, and addressing addiction through community-centered solutions, we can begin to heal the wounds caused by colonialism. Acknowledging the devastating impact of substances like opium and alcohol on Native American communities is a crucial step toward healing and reconciliation. The dark legacy of substance abuse must not define the future of Native American peoples. Instead, we must work collaboratively to ensure that these communities can reclaim their heritage, foster resilience, and build a more just and equitable future. The path to healing requires a recognition of the historical trauma inflicted by colonialism and a commitment to dismantling the structures that continue to perpetuate these harms. The history of Native Americans is marked by a long and tragic saga of government policies aimed at their destruction. Among the most insidious of these policies was the forced use of alcohol and other drugs as tools to weaken Native resistance and assimilate Indigenous peoples into white society. Alcohol, initially introduced by European colonists as a form of currency and a way to gain favor with tribal leaders, quickly became a devastating force in Native communities. As alcohol became more widely available, alcoholism rates among Native Americans skyrocketed, leading to widespread social problems, including violence, crime, and poverty. In the 19th century, the United States government actively promoted the use of alcohol among Native Americans as part of a larger strategy to break down tribal cultures and force assimilation. The government employed various methods to promote alcohol consumption, including selling it at low prices, establishing saloons and liquor stores near reservations, and encouraging Native Americans to adopt European drinking habits. These policies had devastating consequences for Native communities, as alcoholism became rampant, weakening the social and cultural fabric of tribes and leaving them more vulnerable to government policies aimed at dispossessing them of their lands and resources. The government's use of alcohol as a weapon of colonization was not limited to alcohol alone. Other drugs, including opium, morphine, and cocaine, were also used to control and destroy Native American communities. These substances were distributed to Native Americans through various means, including as gifts to tribal leaders, at low prices, or as part of treaty payments. The result was widespread addiction, disease, and death, further weakening Native resistance to government policies aimed at assimilating them into white society. The forced use of these substances was a key part of the U.S. government's strategy to destroy Native American communities and assert control over their lands and cultures. The Indian Trade and Intercourse Act of 1817 prohibited the sale or distribution of alcohol to Native Americans, but the law was rarely enforced. The General Allotment Act of 1887, also known as the Dawes Act, further weakened Native American communities by breaking up tribal lands and allotting them to individual Native Americans, making it easier for them to lose their land to alcohol-related debts. While the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 restored some tribal sovereignty, the government continued to control the sale and distribution of alcohol on reservations. The devastating impact of forced substance use on Native American communities is a stark reminder of the manipulation employed by colonizers to weaken and control these societies. Rates of alcoholism and addiction soared, leading to widespread social and economic issues, fractured families, and weakened governance structures. This forced dependency on substances like alcohol and opium created a cycle of trauma that still affects Native American communities today. Addressing this legacy requires a commitment to understanding the historical context and supporting healing efforts. We must acknowledge the harms inflicted and work to dismantle the systems perpetuating inequality and addiction. By supporting Native communities in reclaiming their cultural identities, fostering community-based solutions, and addressing the root causes of substance abuse, we can begin to repair the damage caused by colonial exploitation. The tragic history of government policies that weaponized substance abuse underscores the destructive power of unchecked exploitation. Through acknowledging this history and addressing its ongoing effects, we can ensure that Native American communities have the opportunity to heal and thrive. Substances like alcohol, opium, and tobacco were used to weaken resistance, facilitate land theft, and enforce assimilation. For example, in 1775, British Lieutenant Colonel Henry Bouquet distributed contaminated rum to native warriors, while Spanish colonizers used alcohol to subdue and enslave indigenous Californians. The introduction of these substances was not incidental. It was a calculated tactic to erode native societies, stripping them of their health, culture, and autonomy. The forced assimilation of Native American children into boarding schools further compounded this trauma. Harmful substances were used as tools of control, erasing identities and making children more compliant. The effects of these practices persist in intergenerational trauma and ongoing health disparities. Healing these wounds requires culturally sensitive treatment, an understanding of historical trauma, and a commitment to promoting resilience. By recognizing the past and supporting the well-being of Native communities, we can help build a future free from the burdens of substance abuse and exploitation. Thank you for watching this video until the end. If you found this content informative, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell to stay updated with more insightful content like this.